Give me your ID right now.
Sir, what seems to be the problem?
You're acting suspicious. ID now.
I'm just getting gas. I can comply if you...
Stop talking and do what I told you.
My children are here. Please step back.
Hands where I can see them.
The dashboard camera footage revealed everything in crystal clear detail. At 3:17 p.m. on a scorching Tuesday afternoon, a black Mercedes sedan pulled into pump number 4 at the East Side Shell station. Behind the wheel sat a distinguished woman in her early 50s, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing the kind of professional attire that spoke of courtrooms and legal briefs. In the back seat, 2 children aged 8 and 12 were absorbed in their tablets, completely unaware that their ordinary day was about to become a nightmare that would forever change their family's life. What happened next would shock the nation, spark federal investigations, and result in one of the largest police brutality settlements in state history. But more than that, it would expose a culture of corruption and racial bias so deep that it would take years to fully unravel. The woman stepping out of that Mercedes had no idea she was about to become the center of a legal storm that would reshape how we think about police accountability. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. And if this is your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button because stories like this one need to be told, and you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Trust me, what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Judge Rebecca Coleman had just finished a particularly challenging day in family court. She had presided over 3 custody hearings, 2 adoption proceedings, and 1 case involving child endangerment that had kept her up the night before. As one of only 7 black female judges in the entire state, she carried the weight of representation on her shoulders every single day. She knew that her decisions, her demeanor, and even her appearance were scrutinized more closely than her white male counterparts. That afternoon, she had picked up her daughter Maya and son Joshua from their summer camp program. Maya was 8 years old, a bright kid who wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. Joshua, 12, was obsessed with basketball and had been begging his mom to let him try out for the travel team. They were typical kids with typical dreams, and Rebecca worked hard to give them a normal childhood despite the demands of her position. The gas station stop was routine. Rebecca's Mercedes was running low on fuel, and she wanted to fill up before the evening rush hour traffic made the drive home even longer. She pulled up to the pump, turned off the engine, and told the kids she'd be right back. Maya barely looked up from her tablet, where she was watching videos about baby animals. Joshua was deep in a basketball game on his phone. Rebecca stepped out of her car, inserted her credit card into the pump, and began the familiar process of filling her tank. The gas station was moderately busy, with the usual mix of commuters heading home from work. Nothing seemed unusual. The sun was bright, the temperature was climbing toward 90 degrees, and Rebecca was already thinking about what to make for dinner. That's when Officer Kevin Nash spotted her from his patrol car parked across the street. Nash was a 15-year veteran of the Metro Police Department, with a history that would later become the subject of intense scrutiny. He had joined the force straight out of high school, working his way up from beat cop to patrol supervisor. On paper, his record looked decent enough. He had received commendations for community service and had never been formally disciplined for excessive force. But scratch beneath the surface, and a different picture emerged. Internal complaints had been filed against Nash 7 times in the past 3 years. All 7 complaints came from black citizens who claimed he had treated them with unnecessary aggression or had stopped them without probable cause. Each complaint had been investigated by his own department and dismissed due to lack of evidence or conflicting witness statements. Nash's fellow officers consistently backed up his version of events, and the complainants were often portrayed as unreliable or having ulterior motives. What the department didn't know was that Nash had been posting on social media forums under an anonymous username for years. He shared his views about certain neighborhoods, certain types of people, and what he saw as the real problems facing law enforcement. These posts would later be discovered by federal investigators and would paint a picture of an officer whose personal beliefs had no business being anywhere near a badge and gun. That Tuesday afternoon, Nash claimed later in his incident report that he noticed a black Mercedes at the gas station and thought the vehicle looked suspicious. He said something about the way the driver was acting seemed off, though he could never articulate exactly what that meant. He decided to conduct what he called a welfare check. Nash pulled his cruiser into the gas station parking lot and approached Rebecca while she was still pumping gas. The children were still in the back seat, visible through the rear windows, still absorbed in their devices. Rebecca noticed the police car pull up but didn't think much of it. Officers sometimes stopped at gas stations for coffee or snacks. She continued pumping her gas. Nash got out of his patrol car and walked directly toward Rebecca. His body language was already aggressive, his shoulders squared, his hand resting on his duty belt. Rebecca looked up as he approached, offering the polite smile she had learned to give to law enforcement officers, the kind of smile that said she was cooperative and non-threatening. Nash didn't return the smile. Instead, he demanded to see her identification. Rebecca, confused, asked if there was a problem. Nash repeated his demand, louder this time, drawing the attention of other customers at nearby pumps. Rebecca remained calm and asked again what the issue was. She explained that she was simply getting gas and would be leaving shortly. This is when Nash made his first major mistake. He told Rebecca that she was acting suspicious and that he had received reports of someone matching her description involved in suspicious activity in the area. This was a complete lie, and the gas station's security cameras would later prove that Nash had no radio communication about any suspicious activity. He had fabricated the entire justification for the stop. Rebecca, drawing on her years of legal experience, asked Nash to be specific about what activity she was suspected of. She spoke calmly and clearly, using the kind of measured tone she employed in her courtroom. She knew her rights, and she knew that Nash's behavior was already crossing legal lines. But she also knew that challenging a police officer, especially as a black woman, could escalate a situation quickly and dangerously. Nash didn't like being questioned. He stepped closer to Rebecca, invading her personal space. He told her to stop asking questions and produce her identification immediately. Rebecca, still trying to de-escalate, reached for her purse to retrieve her driver's license. As she did, Nash apparently decided that her movement toward her purse was threatening. What happened next was captured on multiple security cameras from different angles. Nash grabbed Rebecca's wrist and twisted it behind her back before she could even open her purse. She cried out in pain and told him he was hurting her. Nash ignored her and forced her to bend over the hood of her car. The gas pump handle was still in the tank, gas still flowing. Other customers at the gas station stopped what they were doing and began to stare. Some pulled out their phones and started recording. A few people called out, asking if everything was okay. Nash yelled for everyone to mind their own business and step back. Inside the Mercedes, Maya and Joshua heard their mother's voice. They looked up from their devices to see a police officer forcing their mother over the hood of their car. Maya started crying immediately. Joshua, older and more aware of what was happening, began recording on his phone while shouting for the officer to stop hurting his mom. Rebecca tried to explain to Nash that she was a judge, that there had been a misunderstanding, and that she would gladly show him her identification if he would just let her reach for it safely. Nash either didn't hear her or didn't care. He was committed to his course of action now, and backing down would mean admitting he had made a mistake. Nash called for backup, claiming over his radio that he had a combative suspect who was resisting arrest. This was another lie that would later be contradicted by the video evidence. Rebecca was not combative, and she was certainly not resisting arrest, since Nash had never actually announced that she was under arrest for anything. Within minutes, 2 additional patrol cars arrived at the scene. Officers Williams and Rodriguez stepped out of their vehicles and immediately assessed the situation. What they saw should have been a red flag. A well-dressed professional woman bent over a car hood while Nash held her in place, 2 children crying in the back seat, and a crowd of witnesses recording everything on their phones. Instead of questioning Nash's actions or attempting to de-escalate, both officers assumed that Nash must have had good reason for the detention. This assumption would prove to be another critical failure in the chain of events that was spiraling out of control. Nash decided he needed to search Rebecca's purse for weapons or evidence of whatever crime he was convinced she had committed. When he reached for her purse, Rebecca instinctively pulled it closer to her body. This natural protective response was interpreted by Nash as continued resistance. Have you ever witnessed something like this happening in public? Let me know in the comments if you've seen police interactions that made you uncomfortable. Nash made the decision to physically remove the purse from Rebecca's possession. As he grabbed for it, Rebecca stumbled slightly, trying to maintain her balance while still bent over the car hood. Nash interpreted this as an attempt to flee or fight back. What happened next would become the focal point of the federal civil rights lawsuit that followed. Nash, claiming that Rebecca was actively resisting and potentially dangerous, made the split-second decision to take her to the ground. But this wasn't a controlled takedown or a textbook arrest procedure. This was a violent tackle that sent both of them crashing into the pavement next to the gas pump. Rebecca's head hit the concrete with a sickening thud that was audible on the security camera footage. Her professional blazer tore as she scraped across the rough asphalt. Nash's full body weight came down on top of her, driving her face first into the ground. The impact was so severe that witnesses later said they thought they had just watched someone die. Maya's screaming intensified as she watched her mother disappear beneath the police officer. Joshua jumped out of the car, still recording, screaming at Nash to get off his mom. Officer Rodriguez had to physically restrain the 12-year-old boy to prevent him from interfering with what Nash was still claiming was a lawful arrest. Rebecca lay motionless for several seconds, blood beginning to pool beneath her head where it had struck the concrete. Nash, realizing that the situation had escalated far beyond what he had intended, finally got off of her and called for an ambulance. But the damage was done, and not just the physical damage to Rebecca's body. The crowd of witnesses had grown larger, and multiple people were now recording from different angles. The gas station's security system had captured everything in high definition. A sitting judge had just been brutally tackled by a police officer in front of her children for the crime of getting gas while black. Rebecca remained unconscious for nearly 3 minutes while paramedics were en route. During those terrifying moments, Nash stood over her motionless body, apparently trying to process what he had just done. Officer Williams knelt beside Rebecca, checking for a pulse while repeatedly asking if she could hear him. The children's cries echoed across the gas station parking lot, creating a scene that would haunt everyone who witnessed it. When Rebecca finally regained consciousness, she was disoriented and bleeding from a deep gash on her forehead. Her vision was blurry, and she couldn't remember where she was or what had happened. The first thing she saw was Nash's face hovering above her, and she instinctively tried to move away from him, which Nash again interpreted as resistance. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes after Nash's call for medical assistance. Paramedic Sarah Johnson later testified that she had never seen such obvious head trauma from what was supposed to be a routine police detention. Rebecca's pupils were dilated, she was showing signs of severe concussion, and she had sustained multiple lacerations from the concrete impact. But Nash wasn't finished. Even as paramedics were trying to assess Rebecca's injuries, he insisted on handcuffing her to the ambulance gurney. When Rebecca asked why she was being arrested, Nash told her she was being charged with resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, and disorderly conduct. None of these charges had any basis in reality, but Nash needed to justify his actions somehow. The ride to Metro General Hospital became another chapter in this growing nightmare. Rebecca drifted in and out of consciousness while handcuffed to a medical stretcher. Maya and Joshua were not allowed to ride in the ambulance with their mother. Instead, they were left at the gas station with Officer Rodriguez, 2 traumatized children who had just watched their mother get brutally attacked by someone who was supposed to protect and serve. What do you think should have happened to Nash immediately after this incident? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. At the hospital, Rebecca was taken directly to the emergency room where Dr. Amanda Foster began evaluating her injuries. The head trauma was severe enough to require a CT scan to rule out brain bleeding. She had sustained a concussion, multiple facial lacerations, severe bruising on her back and shoulders, and a sprained wrist from when Nash had twisted her arm behind her back. Dr. Foster was appalled when she learned that her patient was handcuffed to the hospital bed. She demanded that Nash remove the restraints, pointing out that Rebecca was clearly in no condition to pose a threat to anyone. Nash refused, claiming that Rebecca was a dangerous criminal who might try to escape. The absurdity of this statement became even more apparent when Dr. Foster learned that Rebecca was a sitting judge. Nash had no idea who he had just brutalized. In his incident report, he described Rebecca as an uncooperative suspect who had matched the description of someone involved in suspicious activity. He claimed she had resisted his lawful commands and had attempted to assault him during the arrest. Every single word was a fabrication, but Nash was counting on the usual blue wall of silence to protect him. The truth began to emerge when Rebecca's husband, Dr. Michael Coleman, arrived at the hospital after receiving a frantic call from Joshua. Michael was a respected cardiologist at the same hospital where his wife was now being treated. When he saw Rebecca handcuffed to a bed with her face covered in bandages, he immediately understood that something catastrophic had occurred. Michael demanded answers from Nash, who was still stationed outside Rebecca's hospital room. Nash gave him the same story about suspicious activity and resisting arrest. Michael, who had been married to Rebecca for 16 years, knew that his wife would never resist a police officer. She was too smart, too experienced with the legal system, and too aware of the dangers that confrontation could bring. That's when Michael revealed what Nash had been trying to avoid facing all afternoon. He told Nash that his wife was Judge Rebecca Coleman of the 5th District Court, a woman who had spent her entire career working within the justice system that Nash claimed to represent. The color drained from Nash's face as the implications of what he had done began to sink in. Within an hour, news of the incident had reached the courthouse where Rebecca worked. Judge Harold Patterson, the chief judge of the district, immediately contacted the mayor's office and the police commissioner. Word spread quickly through the legal community that one of their own had been brutally assaulted by a police officer while simply getting gas with her children. The police department's initial response was predictable and infuriating. Commissioner Robert Hayes held a press conference that evening where he promised a thorough investigation while also cautioning the public not to rush to judgment. He emphasized that police officers make split-second decisions in dangerous situations and that all the facts needed to be gathered before drawing conclusions. This measured response might have worked if the incident had been captured by a single, grainy security camera from a distance. But the gas station's high-definition surveillance system had recorded everything from multiple angles. Additionally, at least 12 witnesses had recorded portions of the encounter on their phones. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The video footage began circulating on social media that same evening. The first clip, posted by Joshua himself, showed Nash tackling his mother to the ground while Maya screamed in the background. The 19-second video was viewed over 2 million times in the first 6 hours after it was posted. The hashtag Justice for Judge Coleman began trending nationally before midnight. Legal experts who reviewed the footage were unanimous in their assessment. Rebecca had done nothing that could remotely justify Nash's actions. She had been polite, cooperative, and had attempted to comply with his requests. Nash had escalated the situation at every turn, lied about his justifications, and used excessive force against a woman who posed no threat whatsoever. The children's trauma became another devastating element of the story. Maya, who was only 8 years old, had nightmares every night for weeks after the incident. She would wake up screaming, convinced that police officers were coming to hurt her mother again. Joshua, who had tried to be brave and document what was happening, blamed himself for not doing more to protect Rebecca. Child psychologist Dr. Lisa Chen, who would later treat both children, explained that witnessing a parent being violently attacked by an authority figure creates deep psychological wounds that can last a lifetime. The children had learned in the most traumatic way possible that the world was not safe, that people in positions of power could hurt their family without consequences. Rebecca spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from her injuries. The physical wounds would heal, but the psychological trauma ran much deeper. She had dedicated her life to believing in the justice system, to the idea that law and order existed to protect innocent people. In one afternoon, a rogue police officer had shattered that fundamental belief. The legal response began immediately. Rebecca's brother, attorney David Coleman, flew in from Washington, D.C., where he worked as a federal prosecutor. He brought with him a team of civil rights lawyers who specialized in police misconduct cases. They began gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and preparing what would become one of the most significant police brutality lawsuits in the state's history. Nash, meanwhile, was placed on administrative leave pending the department's internal investigation. He hired attorney Frank Morrison, a lawyer who specialized in defending police officers accused of excessive force. Morrison's strategy was predictable. He would argue that Nash had acted within his training and that the incident had been blown out of proportion by anti-police sentiment. The first major break in the case came when federal investigators obtained Nash's complete personnel file and began digging into his background. What they discovered was a pattern of behavior that the local police department had either ignored or actively covered up. The 7 previous complaints against Nash were just the tip of the iceberg. Investigators found that Nash had been involved in 17 use-of-force incidents in his 15-year career, a rate that was nearly 4 times higher than the department average. In each case, Nash had claimed that the suspect was resisting or posed a threat. In each case, the suspects were black or Hispanic. In each case, Nash's version of events had been accepted without serious scrutiny. The federal investigation also uncovered Nash's social media activity. Under the username Patriot Officer 1987, Nash had posted hundreds of messages on law enforcement forums expressing his views about crime, race, and policing. The posts revealed a man who saw certain communities as inherently criminal and who believed that aggressive policing was the only way to maintain order. One particularly damning post, written just 2 months before the incident with Rebecca, read, "These people think they can drive around in fancy cars and act like they're better than everyone else. They need to be reminded that the law applies to them too, no matter how much money they have or what kind of job they think makes them special." The discovery of these posts transformed the case from a simple, excessive force incident into a federal civil rights violation with clear evidence of racial motivation. Nash had targeted Rebecca not because of any suspicious behavior, but because he couldn't tolerate seeing a successful black woman in an expensive car. Public pressure mounted as more details emerged. Protests began forming outside the police station and the courthouse. Community leaders demanded Nash's immediate termination and criminal prosecution. The state attorney general announced that her office would conduct its own investigation parallel to the federal inquiry. Rebecca, still recovering from her physical injuries, made the difficult decision to speak publicly about what had happened to her. At a press conference held 1 week after the incident, she sat beside her husband and children, her face still showing the bruises from Nash's attack. Her statement was measured and powerful. She spoke about the fear she had felt lying unconscious on the concrete, not knowing if she would survive to see her children grow up. She talked about the trauma her kids had experienced and the long road to recovery that lay ahead for their entire family. But she also spoke about justice and accountability. Rebecca made it clear that she wasn't seeking revenge against Nash or the police department. She wanted systemic change that would prevent other families from experiencing the same trauma. She wanted training programs, oversight mechanisms, and cultural shifts that would root out the kind of thinking that had led to her assault. The legal proceedings moved forward on multiple fronts. The federal civil rights investigation continued gathering evidence. The state was preparing criminal charges against Nash, and Rebecca's civil lawsuit was building toward what would become a historic settlement. Nash's defense began crumbling as more evidence emerged. Security footage from other businesses in the area showed Nash's patrol car following Rebecca's Mercedes for several blocks before the gas station stop, contradicting his claim that the encounter was random. Cell phone records proved that Nash had not received any radio calls about suspicious activity in the area. Most damaging of all was the testimony of Officer Williams, Nash's backup, who had arrived at the scene. Under pressure from federal investigators and facing potential charges himself for failing to intervene, Williams admitted that Nash's actions had seemed excessive from the moment he arrived at the gas station. Williams testified that Nash had already escalated the situation beyond what any reasonable officer would consider appropriate. He said that Rebecca had appeared calm and cooperative, and that Nash's decision to tackle her seemed to come from nowhere. Williams admitted that he should have stepped in to stop Nash, but had been afraid to challenge a senior officer. This testimony was crucial because it came from within the police department itself. It demonstrated that even Nash's fellow officers recognized that his behavior was outside the bounds of acceptable police conduct. The criminal case against Nash moved through the system with unprecedented speed. District Attorney Maria Santos, who had worked closely with Rebecca on several high-profile cases over the years, personally took charge of the prosecution. Santos had never seen such clear-cut evidence of police misconduct in her 23 years as a prosecutor. The grand jury took less than 2 hours to return indictments against Nash on multiple charges, including aggravated assault, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, filing false police reports, and official misconduct. Each charge carried significant prison time, and the federal hate crime enhancements meant Nash was looking at potentially decades behind bars. Nash's attorney tried desperately to negotiate a plea deal, but Santos wasn't interested in bargaining. The evidence was too strong, the misconduct too egregious, and the public interest too great. This case would go to trial, and Nash would face the full consequences of his actions. The trial began 6 months after the gas station incident. The courthouse was packed every day with supporters of the Coleman family, civil rights activists, and members of the legal community who wanted to see justice served. Security was tight as emotions ran high on both sides. Rebecca testified on the second day of the trial. She described in vivid detail the confusion and terror she felt as Nash escalated what should have been a simple interaction. She talked about the moment she realized her children were watching their mother being brutally attacked by someone they had been taught to trust and respect. The most powerful moment came when Rebecca described regaining consciousness on the concrete. She said the first thing she thought about wasn't her own injuries, but whether Maya and Joshua would ever feel safe again. The courtroom was completely silent as she spoke, and several jurors were visibly moved by her testimony. The defense tried to portray Nash as a dedicated officer who had made an honest mistake under pressure. They brought in character witnesses and attempted to argue that Nash had genuinely believed Rebecca posed a threat. But the video evidence made their arguments seem ridiculous. No reasonable person watching the footage could conclude that Rebecca had done anything threatening or suspicious. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They played the security camera footage from multiple angles, showing clearly that Rebecca had been cooperative throughout the encounter. They presented Nash's social media posts, revealing his pattern of racial bias. They called expert witnesses who explained how Nash's actions violated every standard of professional police conduct. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a use of force expert and former police captain, testified that Nash's decision to tackle Rebecca was not only unnecessary but criminally reckless. She explained that taking someone to the ground on concrete carries a high risk of serious injury or death, and that such force should only be used when facing an immediate threat to life or safety. The jury also heard from the gas station witnesses who had recorded the incident on their phones. One after another, they testified that Rebecca had appeared calm and confused, not aggressive or threatening. A retired teacher named Robert Jenkins said watching Nash attack Rebecca was one of the most disturbing things he had ever witnessed. Perhaps the most damaging testimony came from Nash's own training instructors at the police academy. Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez, who had taught de-escalation techniques for 15 years, reviewed the footage and testified that Nash had violated virtually every principle she had taught him about managing civilian encounters. Nash took the stand in his own defense, a decision that proved disastrous. Under cross-examination, he couldn't explain why he had lied in his incident report about receiving calls about suspicious activity. He couldn't justify why he had escalated the encounter instead of simply asking to see Rebecca's identification. And he couldn't provide any reasonable explanation for why tackling an unarmed woman to concrete pavement had been necessary. The prosecutor pressed Nash about his social media posts, forcing him to read some of his most inflammatory comments aloud in court. When asked if he believed his attitudes about race had influenced his treatment of Rebecca, Nash claimed they hadn't, but his defensive responses suggested otherwise. The trial lasted 3 weeks, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Nash showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but his family members in the courtroom broke down in tears. Rebecca, sitting in the front row with her husband and children, felt a mixture of relief and sadness as justice was finally served. The sentencing hearing took place 2 months later. Judge Thomas Anderson, who had presided over the trial, made it clear that he viewed Nash's crimes as particularly heinous because they had been committed under color of law. Anderson noted that police officers take an oath to protect and serve, and Nash had violated that sacred trust in the most brutal way possible. Nash received 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. He was also ordered to pay restitution to the Coleman family for their medical expenses and counseling costs. Most importantly, Nash was permanently banned from working in law enforcement anywhere in the United States. The civil lawsuit against the police department moved forward simultaneously with the criminal case. Rebecca's legal team had assembled a mountain of evidence showing that Nash's behavior was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of racial bias and excessive force that the department had failed to address. Internal documents revealed that the police department had received dozens of complaints about racially motivated stops and searches over the past 5 years. Nearly all of these complaints had been dismissed without serious investigation. The department's own data showed that black motorists were stopped at rates far higher than their representation in the population, yet contraband was found at lower rates than with white drivers. The federal investigation had also uncovered evidence of a toxic culture within certain units of the police department. Officers routinely made racist jokes and comments, and those who spoke out against such behavior faced retaliation and ostracism. Nash had thrived in this environment, emboldened by supervisors who looked the other way and colleagues who shared his biases. Commissioner Hayes, who had initially defended Nash's actions, was forced to resign in disgrace when internal emails revealed that he had been aware of multiple complaints against Nash but had taken no meaningful action. The emails showed Hayes dismissing the complaints as politically motivated attacks on law enforcement. The city brought in a new police commissioner, Angela Foster, a reform-minded leader from another state who had a track record of cleaning up troubled departments. Foster immediately implemented new training programs, revised use of force policies, and established an independent oversight board with civilian members. But the damage to the department's reputation was severe and lasting. Community trust, built up over decades, had been shattered in a single afternoon at a gas station. Foster faced the enormous challenge of rebuilding relationships with communities that now viewed police with suspicion and fear. The settlement negotiations were intense and prolonged. The city's insurance company initially offered $2 million, an amount that Rebecca's attorneys immediately rejected as insulting. They pointed to recent settlements in similar cases and argued that the Coleman family deserved much more, both for the severity of the assault and the clear evidence of institutional failure. As the negotiations dragged on, more evidence emerged about the department's systemic problems. A whistleblower came forward with documents showing that Nash's supervisors had altered previous incident reports to make his actions appear more justified. This discovery added another layer of misconduct to an already damning case. The breakthrough came when federal mediators became involved in the settlement talks. They helped both sides understand that a prolonged court battle would be expensive and traumatic for everyone involved. The city faced the prospect of a jury trial where the damages could be even higher, while the Coleman family wanted to focus on healing rather than years of litigation. The final settlement amount shocked the legal community. $15 million was one of the largest police misconduct settlements in state history, and it sent a clear message about the consequences of racial profiling and excessive force. The settlement included not just monetary compensation, but also mandatory reforms to police training, oversight, and accountability. Rebecca announced that she would donate a significant portion of the settlement to organizations working on police reform and racial justice. She established the Coleman Foundation, which provides legal assistance to victims of police misconduct and supports research into bias in law enforcement. Officer Kevin Nash's 15 minutes of unchecked power cost him everything and changed countless lives forever. Rebecca Coleman transformed her trauma into lasting reform, proving that sometimes justice does prevail when good people refuse to stay silent. Her courage in that gas station parking lot and in every courtroom battle that followed reminds us that accountability isn't just possible, it's essential. What started as a routine stop for gas became a catalyst for change that will protect families for generations to come. Sometimes the most ordinary moments become extraordinary turning points in the fight for justice. If you think this situation was bad, wait until you see what happens in the case on the right-hand side.
Step away from the vehicle. Now.
Is there a problem, officer?
Where'd you get that uniform?
I'm a Navy SEAL. I just came from a ceremony.
You got ID?
Yes. But what am I being detained for?
Hands on the car. Don't argue.
Deputy Sheriff Travis Holbrook had been with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department for 9 years when he responded to a call that would destroy his life and send him to federal prison for 58 years. He was 34 years old, experienced enough to know better, confident enough to believe his judgment was infallible. One Friday night at a gas station on Highland Avenue, he saw a black man in a Navy uniform and decided it had to be fake. The man was Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell, a decorated Navy SEAL with 16 years of service, multiple combat deployments, and medals for extraordinary heroism. What Holbrook did next, ignoring Mitchell's credentials, dismissing his military ID, and arresting a war hero in full dress uniform, would trigger a Pentagon investigation, federal charges, and a trial that exposed 9 years of documented racial profiling. Holbrook's record told a story San Bernardino County had ignored for nearly a decade. 14 complaints over 9 years. 14. Every single one involved people of color. Every single one followed the same pattern. A black family barbecuing in Glen Helen Regional Park, Holbrook demanded permits, threatened citations when they questioned his authority. A Hispanic teenager skateboarding near Victoria Gardens Mall, detained for 40 minutes, backpacks searched without consent. An Asian businessman photographing architecture downtown, questioned about terrorism surveillance. A black college student driving through Rancho Cucamonga, pulled over for driving suspiciously, car searched, no contraband found. The complaints were documented. The pattern was obvious. But San Bernardino County treated each incident in isolation, never connecting them into what they clearly formed. A deputy who saw people of color in spaces where his biased mind said they didn't belong. Supervisors noted in his evaluations that Holbrook was results-oriented, but sometimes overzealous in community interactions, that he could benefit from additional de-escalation, training, that he should work on cultural sensitivity. But those notes never became consequences. 3 complaints resulted in written reprimands filed away and forgotten. 4 triggered mandatory retraining sessions Holbrook attended but never internalized. 7 were closed with insufficient evidence, despite witness statements. 0 resulted in suspension, demotion, or termination. So Holbrook kept patrolling, kept stopping, kept assuming, and San Bernardino County kept ignoring the pattern until the night Holbrook targeted someone who couldn't be dismissed, someone whose credentials came with Pentagon backing, someone whose arrest would finally force accountability. Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell was 38 years old when Deputy Holbrook decided his Navy uniform must be fake. Mitchell had been a Navy SEAL for 16 years. 16 years of service most people can't comprehend. He joined the Navy at 22, desperate to escape San Bernardino's cycle of poverty and violence that had claimed 3 of his high school friends. Basic training at Great Lakes, then BUD/S, basic underwater demolition, SEAL training, where 80% of candidates quit. Mitchell didn't quit. 6 months of hell, cold water immersions, endless physical torture, sleep deprivation designed to break you. He graduated, earned his trident, the gold pin SEALs wear with pride. Then the real work began. First deployment to Iraq in 2009, Ramadi, clearing buildings, hunting high-value targets, watching teammates take fire. Second deployment to Afghanistan, Helmand Province, 8 months in the mountains, ambushes, IEDs, missions classified even now. Third, deployment back to Iraq, Mosul, the fight against ISIS, operations so intense Mitchell still had nightmares. Syria, Yemen, Somalia, places the American public never heard about, missions that never made the news. In 2016, during an operation in northern Iraq, Mitchell's team was ambushed. 8 SEALs pinned down by heavy machine gun fire, RPGs exploding, teammates wounded. Mitchell, already hit by shrapnel, his leg bleeding, ran into the kill zone 3 times, dragging wounded operators to safety. He held a position alone for 12 minutes while the team evacuated, taking fire from 3 directions, returning fire until his ammunition ran out. All 8 teammates survived. Mitchell earned the Navy Cross, the second highest military decoration for valor, just below the Medal of Honor. The citation described extraordinary heroism under fire and complete disregard for personal safety. He also earned the Purple Heart for his wounds and the Bronze Star with V device for valor in a separate operation. His chest held ribbons most civilians wouldn't recognize, but every service member respected. Combat Action Ribbon, Iraq Campaign Medal with 4 stars, Afghanistan Campaign Medal, NATO Medal, ribbons representing years of sacrifice. That Friday night in October, Mitchell was driving through San Bernardino in his Navy service dress blue uniform, the formal military attire worn for ceremonies and official functions. He'd just come from Naval Base San Diego, a memorial service for a fallen teammate, a brother killed in a training accident. The service had been emotional, exhausting, a reminder of how many friends Mitchell had buried. He was driving to his mother's house to surprise her, hadn't seen her in 8 months, couldn't tell her where he'd been. Classified deployment, dangerous work. He just wanted to hug her, sleep in his childhood bed, pretend for a weekend that the world wasn't burning. At 10:47 p.m., his fuel light came on. He pulled into the Chevron station on Highland Avenue. The Chevron station on Highland Avenue sits at the intersection where San Bernardino's working-class neighborhoods meet the slightly more affluent areas to the north. It's the kind of 24-hour station that serves late-night shift workers, long-haul truckers, and people just passing through. Bright fluorescent lights, 8 pumps, small convenience store with bulletproof glass at the counter. On a Friday night in October, the station was quiet. Just a few cars, people minding their own business, getting gas, and leaving. At 10:47 p.m., Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell pulled his silver Honda Accord into pump number 5. He stepped out, still in his Navy service dress blue uniform. The uniform is unmistakable. Dark navy blue jacket with gold buttons, white shirt underneath, black tie, and matching navy trousers. On his left chest, rows of ribbons in precise military alignment, the Navy Cross at the top, its blue and white stripes immediately recognizable to anyone with military knowledge, Purple Heart below that, Bronze Star with the small bronze V device for valor, campaign medals, service ribbons, each one telling a story of deployment, sacrifice, combat. On his right chest, his gold seal trident, the eagle clutching an anchor, trident, and pistol, the pin every SEAL earns after years of training. His shoulder board showed 2.5 gold stripes, the rank insignia of a lieutenant commander, 04, equivalent to an army major. His military bearing was obvious, the way he stood, shoulders back, head up, the posture drilled into service members through years of training. His shoes were polished. His uniform was immaculate despite the long day. He looked exactly like what he was, a decorated Navy officer in formal military attire. Mitchell swiped his credit card at the pump, selected regular unleaded, and began filling his tank. He was exhausted, emotionally drained from the memorial service, from saying goodbye to another teammate who'd survived combat only to die in a training accident. He was thinking about his mother, about how surprised she'd be to see him, about whether she'd made her famous peach cobbler recently. He wasn't thinking about the person watching him from across the parking lot. Someone who saw his uniform, saw his skin, and decided something must be wrong. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. The call came into San Bernardino County Sheriff's Dispatch at 10:51 p.m. Anonymous caller, refusing to provide a name, calling from a cell phone that would later be traced to an apartment complex 3 blocks from the Chevron station. "Hi, I'm calling about a suspicious person at the gas station on Highland Avenue. There's a black guy wearing what looks like a military costume, and he's been standing there for a while. He looks threatening. I think he might be impersonating a service member or something. Can you send someone to check it out?" The dispatcher asked standard questions. "Is the person doing anything threatening? Has he approached anyone? Is he carrying weapons?" "No, but he just looks suspicious. The uniform looks fake. I don't think he's really military. He doesn't look like he should be wearing that." The dispatcher logged the call, "Suspicious person, possible stolen valor," and sent it out. The call was assigned to Deputy Travis Holbrook, who was patrolling 2 miles away. Holbrook responded immediately. This was exactly the kind of call that activated every bias in his pattern. A black man in a space where Holbrook's assumptions said black men didn't belong, wearing something that seemed too legitimate, too accomplished, too authoritative for Holbrook to accept as real. In Holbrook's mind, the narrative was already written before he arrived. Black guy in military uniform at a gas station late at night, probably homeless, probably mentally ill, probably bought the uniform at a thrift store or online. Stolen valor, impersonating a service member, that's a federal crime. He's going to investigate, probably make an arrest. Another case closed. Holbrook didn't consider that the uniform might be real. He didn't think about calling the base to verify. He didn't wonder why someone impersonating military would wear such an elaborate, expensive, perfectly fitted dress uniform with specific medals and ribbons. He just saw a black man in a military uniform and decided it had to be fake. His bias was so complete, so ingrained after 9 years of targeting people of color without consequences, that evidence didn't matter. His assumptions overrode reality. He pulled into the Chevron station at 10:54 p.m., lights flashing, already approaching this as a criminal matter rather than a welfare check. Mitchell was finishing pumping gas, replacing the nozzle, closing his fuel door, when he saw the patrol car pull in fast, lights swirling red and blue across the concrete. Deputy Holbrook stepped out of his patrol car before it fully stopped, his hand resting on his duty belt near his weapon, his posture aggressive, confrontational. He walked directly toward Mitchell, who was standing next to his Honda, fuel door closed, receipt printing from the pump. Mitchell turned and saw the deputy approaching fast, lights still flashing, and his stomach dropped. He'd been here before, not exactly this situation, but close enough. He knew what was happening. "Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. Now." Mitchell raised his hands slowly, palms out, visible, non-threatening. His voice was calm, controlled, the tone of someone trained to de-escalate tense situations. "Officer, I'm just getting gas. Is there a problem?" Holbrook stopped 3 feet away, his eyes scanning Mitchell up and down, taking in the uniform, the medals, the insignia, and seeing none of it as real. "Military costume isn't funny. You need to take it off right now." Mitchell's heart sank. He'd served 16 years, deployed to combat zones most Americans couldn't find on a map, earned medals for valor under fire, and he was being told his uniform was a costume. He recognized the tone, the assumption, the accusation. This wasn't about the uniform. This was about his skin. "Officer, this isn't a costume. I'm an active duty Navy SEAL. I just came from a memorial service at Naval Base San Diego. I'm on my way to visit my mother." Holbrook's expression didn't change. "Sure you are. Stolen valor is a federal crime. You're impersonating a military officer." Mitchell felt anger rising but kept his voice steady. 16 years of training, of staying calm under pressure, of controlling his reactions when lives depended on it. "Sir, I'm not impersonating anyone. This is my uniform. I earned it. I can show you my military ID, my orders, anything you need to verify." "I don't need to verify anything. I can see what's happening here." Holbrook stepped closer, his voice harder. "You bought that uniform, put on some fake medals, and now you're walking around pretending to be something you're not. It's disrespectful to real service members. Mitchell's jaw tightened. He'd lost friends in Iraq and Afghanistan. He'd held dying teammates. He'd been wounded saving others. And this deputy was telling him he was disrespecting service members. Other customers at the gas station were starting to notice. A man at pump 3 slowed down, watching. A woman inside the convenience store pressed her face against the glass. Should officers verify military credentials before accusing service members? Drop your answer below. Mitchell reached slowly into his jacket pocket, moving deliberately so Holbrook wouldn't misinterpret the action. "Officer, I'm reaching for my military ID. It's in my inside pocket. I'm going to show you my credentials. Keep your hands where I can see them." Holbrook's hand moved closer to his weapon. Mitchell froze, then moved even slower, pulling out his military ID card, the common access card that every service member carries. He held it out. "This is my military ID. Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell, United States Navy. My DoD ID number is right here. You can call Naval Base San Diego. You can call NCIS. You can verify everything." Holbrook took the card, glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds, and handed it back. "Anyone can print a fake ID. They sell them online for $20. Mitchell stared at him. The ID had holograms, security features, an embedded chip, the Department of Defense seal. It was as official as an ID could be. "This isn't fake. Look at the security features. Look at the hologram. This is a military common access card. It's impossible to fake convincingly. Looks fake to me." Mitchell pointed to his chest, to the rows of ribbons precisely aligned. "These ribbons, these medals, they're in the correct order according to military regulations. The Navy Cross, Purple Heart, Bronze Star with V device. These represent specific awards. You can verify every one of them. Anyone can buy fake medals online. I've seen it before." Holbrook's voice was flat, dismissive. Mitchell's patience was wearing thin, but he kept trying. "Sir, I'm asking you to make one phone call. Call the Naval Special Warfare Command duty officer. Call NCIS. They can confirm my identity in 5 minutes. I'm not asking you to take my word. I'm asking you to verify through official channels. I don't need to call anyone. I can tell what's real and what's fake." This was the moment where bias became impenetrable. Holbrook had decided before he arrived that Mitchell was impersonating a service member. Every piece of evidence after that, the ID, the uniform, the medals, the calm demeanor, was filtered through that initial assumption. He wasn't looking at a Navy SEAL. He was looking at a criminal trying to deceive him. The gas station security cameras were recording everything from 2 angles, one mounted above the pumps, one above the convenience store entrance. The footage would later show Mitchell standing calmly, hands visible, speaking in controlled tones. It would show Holbrook aggressive, dismissive, refusing to examine the evidence. Other customers were pulling out their phones now. A man at pump 7 had his camera up, recording. The woman in the store was filming through the glass. Everyone could see what was happening. A black man in military uniform being accused of impersonating a service member despite showing credentials. Mitchell tried one more time. "Officer Holbrook, reading the nameplate, I'm Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell. I've served 16 years in the Navy, 12 as a SEAL. I have my military ID, my orders in my car, my leave papers. I'm asking you to verify my credentials before this goes any further." Holbrook's voice turned hard, commanding. "Take off that uniform right now. You're not authorized to wear it. Remove it immediately." Mitchell stared at him, processing what was being demanded. Strip out of his dress uniform at a gas station under fluorescent lights with strangers watching? Remove the uniform he'd earned through blood and sacrifice? "I'm not stripping out of my dress uniform at a gas station, sir. This is my uniform. I'm authorized to wear it. I'm an active duty officer. That's a direct order. Remove the uniform or I'll remove it for you." Mitchell's voice remained controlled, but the edge was unmistakable. "Officer, what you're demanding is unreasonable and unlawful. I'm not removing my uniform. I've shown you my credentials. I've asked you to verify my identity. You're refusing to do basic due diligence." Holbrook reached for his radio. Dispatch, this is 3 Adam 1-2. I need backup at the Chevron station on Highland. Suspect is belligerent, refusing lawful orders, possible stolen valor situation. Mitchell's hands were still raised, visible, non-threatening. His voice carried across the parking lot, clear enough for the recording phones to capture. I am not belligerent. I am not refusing lawful orders. I am a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, and I'm being unlawfully detained. Holbrook stepped closer, invading Mitchell's space. You're impersonating a military officer? That's a federal crime under the Stolen Valor Act. You're under arrest. The irony was staggering. Holbrook was accusing Mitchell of stolen valor while about to commit deprivation of rights under color of law, false imprisonment, assault on a military service member, multiple federal felonies that would send Holbrook to prison for decades. But Holbrook couldn't see it. His bias was complete. Mitchell took a slow breath, the kind he'd learned in combat when staying calm meant survival. Sir, I've served this country for 16 years. I've deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. I've been wounded in combat. I've saved lives. I've earned every ribbon on this uniform. I'm not a criminal. I'm asking you one more time to verify my credentials before you make a mistake that destroys your career. Your career is over, buddy. You're going to jail. 2 more patrol cars pulled into the station, lights flashing, sirens winding down. Deputy Maria Santos and Deputy Jeff Coleman stepped out, assessing the situation. A black man in military uniform, hands raised, calm demeanor. Their colleague aggressive, confrontational. Santos exchanged a glance with Coleman. This didn't look right. Santos approached first. Holbrook, what's the situation? Stolen valor. Subject is impersonating a naval officer, refuses to remove the fake uniform, refuses lawful orders. Santos looked at Mitchell, at the uniform, at the rows of medals that looked expensive, official, precisely arranged. Sir, can you identify yourself? Mitchell's voice was steady, professional. I'm Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell, United States Navy SEALs. I showed Deputy Holbrook my military ID. I've asked him repeatedly to verify my credentials through Naval Base San Diego, or NCIS. He's refused. This is an unlawful detention. Coleman stepped closer, examining the uniform more carefully. The ribbons were in correct precedence order. Navy Cross at the top, something you couldn't fake without detailed military knowledge. The trident looked authentic, the weight and quality of real gold. The shoulder boards showed proper rank insignia. Holbrook, did you verify his ID? It's fake. Anyone can see that. Santos pulled out her phone. What base are you assigned to, sir? Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, SEAL Team 3. My commanding officer is Captain Raymond Torres. The duty officer tonight should be Lieutenant Hayes. You can call the quarterdeck. They'll confirm my identity in 2 minutes. Santos started to dial. Holbrook grabbed her arm. We don't need to call. I'm telling you it's fake. Santos pulled her arm away, her expression hardening. Holbrook, if there's any chance he's legitimate, we verify. That's basic procedure. He's not legitimate. He's black. Look at him. You really think he's a Navy SEAL? The words hung in the air, captured by multiple phones, recorded by gas station cameras. The implicit bias made explicit. Santos and Coleman both recoiled. Mitchell closed his eyes briefly. There it was. The truth Holbrook had been dancing around, finally said out loud. Coleman's voice dropped low. Holbrook, what did you just say? But Holbrook was committed now, too deep to back out. I'm arresting him. Subject, turn around, hands behind your back. Mitchell made a decision. He could resist, argue, make this physical, or he could comply, document everything, and let the system that Holbrook represented deal with what came next. He turned around, placing his hands behind his back. I'm complying under protest. I am Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell, active duty United States Navy SEAL. This arrest is unlawful. I've committed no crime. I've shown proper identification. I've requested verification through official channels. This is being recorded by multiple witnesses and security cameras. Holbrook pulled out his handcuffs and snapped them on Mitchell's wrists, deliberately tight, the metal cutting into skin. Mitchell winced but said nothing. The handcuffs crushed against his uniform jacket, wrinkling the fabric, pressing the metals into his chest. Santos stood frozen, her phone still in her hand, watching something that felt catastrophically wrong. Coleman's face showed pure horror at what his colleague was doing. Holbrook walked Mitchell toward his patrol car, one hand gripping Mitchell's arm, the other on his duty belt. Mitchell's dress shoes scraped across the concrete. His uniform, immaculate 10 minutes ago, was now wrinkled, disheveled. The ribbons sat askew. His tie was pulled to one side. A decorated war hero, a man who'd earned the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism, being perp-walked across a gas station parking lot like a common criminal. The customers at the gas station erupted. "He's really in the military. We saw his ID. Check his credentials. Call the base. This is wrong. He didn't do anything. Officer, you're making a mistake. He showed you his ID." Holbrook ignored them all. Several onlookers had called 911, but the dispatcher said deputies were already on scene. Others felt powerless to intervene with an armed officer. Santos and Coleman stood by their cars, uncertain, conflicted, watching their colleague commit a federal crime. Why do some officers see black men in uniform and assume it's fake? Comment your thoughts. The drive to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Station took 11 minutes. Mitchell sat in the back of Holbrook's patrol car, hands cuffed behind him, the metal digging into his wrists. The partition separated him from Holbrook, who drove in silence, probably already writing his arrest report in his head, convinced he'd done good police work. Mitchell stared out the window at the streets he'd grown up on, the neighborhoods he'd escaped through military service, now being driven through them in handcuffs. They arrived at the station at 11:19 p.m. Holbrook pulled into the Sallyport, the secure garage where prisoners are brought in, away from public view. He opened the back door and pulled Mitchell out, walking him through the metal door into the booking area. The booking sergeant on duty was Luis Moreno, a 19-year veteran who'd seen everything, or thought he had. He looked up from his computer as Holbrook walked Mitchell in and froze. A man in Navy service dress blues, full uniform, rows of ribbons on his chest, the Navy Cross visible at the top, gold trident on his lapel, hands cuffed behind his back. Moreno stood up slowly. "Holbrook, what the hell did you arrest?" "Stolen valor. Subject was at a gas station impersonating a naval officer, wearing a fake uniform, fake medals. Refused to remove the uniform when ordered. Refused lawful commands. I'm booking him for impersonating a military officer under federal statute." Moreno walked around his desk, approaching Mitchell, examining the uniform more closely. The ribbons were in perfect order, arranged according to military precedence regulations. The Navy Cross, Navy and Marine Corps Medal, Purple Heart, Bronze Star with the small V device, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Joint Service Commendation Medal, campaign ribbons from Iraq and Afghanistan. The uniform fit perfectly, tailored, expensive. The shoes were polished to a mirror shine. The trident looked like real gold, not costume jewelry. "Sir, what's your name?" "Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell, United States Navy, serial number N4378921. I showed Deputy Holbrook my military ID. I asked him to verify my credentials. He refused." Mitchell's voice was calm but carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting an absurd battle for the past 30 minutes. Moreno held out his hand. "Can I see your ID?" Mitchell nodded toward his jacket pocket. "Inside left pocket." Moreno carefully reached into Mitchell's pocket and pulled out the common access card. He examined it under the bright booking area lights. Hologram intact, embedded security chip visible, Department of Defense seal embossed. Photo matched the man standing in front of him. The ID showed rank, Lieutenant Commander 04, Branch of Service, United States Navy, expiration date 18 months from now. Moreno turned to Holbrook. "This looks real. It's fake. Anyone can print those." Moreno had seen fake military IDs before. They were usually obviously counterfeit, printed on regular cardstock, no security features, wrong fonts. This wasn't that. This had weight, texture, multiple security layers. "Holbrook, This has an RFID chip. You can't fake that. He walked back to his desk and picked up his phone. What base are you assigned to, Commander? Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, SEAL Team 3. Moreno dialed the number for NAB Coronado Quarterdeck, the 24-hour duty station. It rang twice. Quarterdeck, Petty Officer Hayes speaking. This is a non-secure line. This is Sergeant Moreno, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. I need to verify the identity of someone claiming to be one of your personnel. Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell says he's assigned to SEAL Team 3. There was a pause, the sound of typing. Stand by, Sergeant. The wait felt like forever, but lasted maybe 90 seconds. Hayes came back on the line, his voice more formal. Sergeant, I can confirm Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell is an active duty officer assigned to Naval Special Warfare Group 1, SEAL Team 3. What's the nature of your inquiry? Moreno's face went white. He's been arrested. Arrested? For what? Hold on. Moreno looked at Holbrook, then at Mitchell, then back at Holbrook. He's real. He's an active duty SEAL Team 3 officer. You arrested a Navy SEAL. Within 6 minutes of that phone call, the situation escalated beyond anything San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department had ever handled. Petty Officer Hayes immediately notified his officer of the deck. The OOD notified the command duty officer. The CDO notified the SEAL Team 3 commanding officer, Captain Raymond Torres, at his home. Torres, knowing Mitchell had been at a memorial service that evening and was heading to visit family, immediately understood something had gone catastrophically wrong. At 11:31 p.m., Torres called the Naval Criminal Investigative Service duty officer in San Diego. This is Captain Torres, SEAL Team 3. One of my officers, Lieutenant Commander Darius Mitchell, has been arrested by San Bernardino County Sheriff. I need NCIS involved immediately. The NCIS agent, Special Agent Kellerman, pulled up Mitchell's service record on his computer as Torres spoke. Combat deployments, Navy Cross, Purple Heart, active security clearance, 0 disciplinary issues. Captain, what are the charges? Unknown, but he was in dress blues heading to visit his mother. Whatever happened, this needs federal attention. NCIS notified Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters. NSW Command has a direct line to the Pentagon for situations involving special operations personnel. By 11:47 p.m., the duty officer at the Pentagon's Naval Operations Center was briefed. A Navy SEAL, decorated combat veteran, arrested in California under unclear circumstances. This wasn't a local matter anymore. At 12:03 a.m., Navy JAG, Judge Advocate General's Corps, attorneys at Naval Base San Diego were activated. 2 senior military lawyers began preparing to drive to San Bernardino. Pentagon public affairs officers were notified, preparing for what could become a national story. At 12:15 a.m., Captain Torres personally called Sheriff Robert Decker at home. Decker, roused from sleep, listened as Torres explained, with barely controlled anger, that one of his officers, a decorated SEAL with 16 years of exemplary service, had been arrested at a gas station for wearing his uniform. Sheriff, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell holds a top-secret, sensitive compartmented information clearance. He's been on classified deployments. He's earned the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism, and one of your deputies arrested him for stolen valor. I have Navy JAG en route. I have NCIS involved. And I'm about to notify the Secretary of the Navy that one of my SEALs was arrested for being black in uniform. Decker's blood went cold. He immediately called the station, demanded the watch commander brief him. The watch commander pulled the booking information, saw Mitchell's name, saw the charges, saw that Sergeant Moreno had already verified Mitchell's military status. Decker arrived at the station by 12:40 a.m., still in civilian clothes, his face showing the horror of someone who just realized his department had committed an unthinkable error. He walked into the booking area where Mitchell still stood, hands now uncuffed, uniform wrinkled, but dignity intact. Commander Mitchell, I'm Sheriff Decker. I cannot adequately apologize for what's happened. You're being released immediately. All charges are dropped. Mitchell's voice was quiet, controlled. Sheriff, your deputy arrested a decorated military officer at a gas station for wearing his uniform. He refused to verify my credentials. He demanded I strip out of my dress blues in public. He handcuffed me in front of witnesses. This isn't something an apology fixes. Decker nodded, his face pale. I understand, sir. We'll conduct a full investigation. The Pentagon is already conducting their investigation, Sheriff. This is out of your hands now. While Mitchell stood in the booking area waiting for the sheriff to process his release, his complete service record was being pulled up on computer screens from San Diego to Washington, D.C. Every deployment, every mission, every award, every evaluation was being reviewed by Navy leadership, NCIS investigators, Pentagon officials, and within hours, the U.S. Attorney's Office. The record painted a picture that made Holbrook's arrest not just wrong, but obscene. Darius Mitchell had enlisted in the Navy at 22 years old, scored high enough on the ASVAB to qualify for any rating, chose to attempt BUD-S training. He'd survived Hell Week, the infamous 5.5 days of continuous training with maximum 4 hours of sleep total. He'd survived the pool competency tests where instructors tried to drown you to test your calm under pressure. He'd survived the cold, the pain, the instructors designed to break you. 78% of his class quit. Mitchell graduated, earned his trident, became a Navy SEAL. First deployment came in 2009. Iraq, Ramadi, and Fallujah. Clearing buildings, hunting high-value targets, combat operations that lasted months. Second deployment, Afghanistan, Helmand Province, 2011. Hunting Taliban commanders in the mountains. 8 months of firefights and IED threats. Third deployment, back to Iraq in 2014, Mosul, fighting ISIS, operations so intense the casualty rate for his platoon was 40%. Fourth deployment, Syria, 2016, classified operations against ISIS leadership. Fifth deployment, Yemen, 2018, counter-terrorism missions the American public never heard about. Sixth deployment, back to Afghanistan, 2019, training Afghan special forces while conducting direct action missions. 6 combat deployments over 12 years as a SEAL. Most Americans serve 1 deployment their entire career. Mitchell had 6. In 2016, during an operation outside Mosul, Mitchell's 8-man SEAL team was ambushed while securing a compound. Heavy machine gun fire from 3 directions, RPGs exploding, walls collapsing. 2 teammates were hit immediately, wounded, unable to move. Mitchell, already hit by shrapnel in his left leg, bleeding, his uniform soaked with blood, ran into the kill zone. He dragged the first wounded SEAL to cover, 40 yards under continuous fire. Ran back into the kill zone for the second. Then a third teammate was hit. Mitchell went back again. He held a defensive position alone for 12 minutes while the team called for air support and evacuated the wounded. He fired his M4 until the mag—
Stop talking. You're being detained.
I'm active duty. This is a military hospital.
Turn and face the wall.
I didn't consent to any search.
Donovan, hold up. Something's not adding up.
I found it under his seat.
A uniformed Army medic was handcuffed outside a military hospital while trying to report for duty. The officer who arrested him had no idea that the Pentagon was already watching, that federal investigators had been tracking a pattern, and that this single incident would trigger charges carrying 68 years in prison. What happened in those 11 minutes would expose a network of corruption so deep that it reached into 3 police departments, involved falsified reports going back 7 years, and ultimately required intervention from the Department of Defense itself. Staff Sergeant Jordan Hayes was 29 years old and had served in the Army for 8 years. He specialized in emergency trauma care and had completed 2 deployments, one to Afghanistan and one to Iraq. He held certifications in advanced cardiac life support, tactical combat casualty care, and pediatric emergency medicine. On the morning of September 14th, he was wearing his full Army combat uniform, driving to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, where he worked in the emergency department. Jordan had left his apartment at 6:45 in the morning. His shift started at 7:30. The drive normally took 20 minutes, but he always left early because military punctuality wasn't a suggestion. He was driving a Honda Civic, 3 years old, properly registered, with current tags and insurance. He wasn't speeding, he used his turn signals. He stopped completely at stop signs. He was doing absolutely nothing wrong. At 7:02, he was pulled over by Officer Keith Donovan of the Montgomery County Police Department. Donovan activated his lights on a residential street about 2 miles from the hospital. Jordan pulled over immediately, put the car in park, turned off the engine, and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they were visible. This was standard procedure that every service member learned. Comply, stay calm, document everything. Donovan approached the driver's side window. Jordan kept his hands visible and waited for instructions before moving. "License and registration," Donovan said. Jordan spoke clearly. "Officer, I'm reaching for my wallet now. It's in my right cargo pocket. I'm moving slowly." He retrieved his military ID and driver's license. He opened the glove compartment slowly and retrieved the registration and insurance documents. He handed everything to Donovan through the window. Donovan looked at the military ID. He looked at Jordan's uniform. He looked at the registration. Then he walked back to his patrol car without saying anything. Jordan sat perfectly still, hands back on the steering wheel. He checked the time. 7:06. He was going to be late for his shift if this took much longer. After 4 minutes, Donovan returned to the window. "Step out of the vehicle." Jordan's training kicked in. "Officer, can you tell me why I'm being pulled over?" "Just step out of the vehicle, sir." Jordan complied. He opened the door slowly, stepped out, and stood next to the car with his hands visible. Donovan was looking at him with an expression that Jordan had seen before. Suspicion mixed with something else. Hostility, maybe, or contempt. "Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle." "Officer, I need to get to the hospital. I'm due on shift in 20 minutes. I'm a medic at Walter Reed. I haven't done anything wrong. Can you please tell me what this is about?" Donovan's hand moved to his service weapon. He didn't draw it, but the message was clear. "I'm not going to ask again. Turn around and put your hands on the vehicle." Jordan turned around. He placed his hands flat on the roof of his car. He felt Donovan pat him down aggressively, checking for weapons. The pat-down was thorough and unnecessary. Jordan wasn't reaching for anything. He wasn't making sudden movements. He was in full military uniform at 7 in the morning on his way to work at a federal military hospital. "Where are you coming from?" "Home." "Where's home?" "Silver Spring." "What were you doing there?" "Sleeping." "I live there." "Where are you going?" "Walter Reed." "I'm a medic. I work in the emergency department. My shift starts in 15 minutes. Donovan stepped back. "Stay here." He walked back to his patrol car again. Jordan looked at his watch. 7:14. He was officially going to be late. He pulled out his phone with slow, deliberate movements and texted his supervisor. "Pulled over on Rockville Pike. Officer won't explain why. Going to be late. Sorry." His supervisor, a senior medic named Lieutenant Ava Richardson, responded immediately. "Are you okay? What's happening?" "Don't know. He stopped me 2 miles from the hospital. Won't say why. Been here 12 minutes. I'm in uniform." Richardson's response came fast. "Stay calm. Document everything. I'm making calls." Jordan didn't know what that meant, but he trusted her. Richardson had been in the Army for 14 years. She knew how things worked. Donovan returned to Jordan's car. He was holding something in his hand. A small plastic bag. He held it up. "What's this?" Jordan looked at it. He had never seen it before in his life. "I don't know what that is. It's not mine. It was under your seat." "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen that before." "You're telling me this isn't yours?" "I'm telling you I've never seen that before. That's not mine. Whatever it is, it didn't come from my car." The bag contained a white powder. Jordan's stomach dropped. He knew exactly what was happening. He had heard stories from other service members, other black men in uniform who had been stopped and suddenly had drugs appear in their vehicles. Stories that sounded too calculated to be coincidence. "You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance." "Officer, that's not mine. I don't use drugs. I'm subject to random urinalysis. I get tested constantly. The Army tests me. That's not mine. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Jordan's mind was racing. If he resisted, even verbally, it would escalate. If he complied, he'd be arrested for something he didn't do. Either way, his career could be destroyed. Random drug tests were mandatory in the military. He had passed every single one for 8 years. But an arrest, even a false arrest, could trigger an investigation. It could delay his security clearance renewal. It could damage his reputation. I need to call my command. You can call from the station. I need to call now. I'm active duty military. I have rights under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. This is unlawful. Turn around now or you'll be charged with resisting arrest too. Jordan made a decision. He turned around. He put his hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut. They were too tight. He felt the metal cutting into his wrists. He didn't say anything. Donovan walked him to the patrol car and put him in the back seat. The plastic seat was hard. The car smelled like old fast food and sweat. Jordan sat perfectly still. His mind was working through the legal implications, the chain of command notifications, the statements he'd need to make. What Jordan didn't know was that Lieutenant Richardson had made 3 phone calls in the time he'd been detained. The first call went to the hospital's military police liaison. The second went to the base legal office. The third went to a number she wasn't supposed to have but had been given 6 months earlier by someone at the Pentagon. Someone who had told her that if anything unusual ever happened to any of her medics, anything that felt wrong, she should call immediately. Richardson made that call at 7:19. By 7:22, federal investigators were already mobilizing. Because Jordan Hayes wasn't the first. He was the 7th uniformed service member pulled over by Montgomery County Police in the past 18 months under nearly identical circumstances. Early morning, close to Walter Reed, vague traffic stop, alleged drugs found in the vehicle. The pattern had been noticed. The Pentagon had been watching. Jordan sat in that patrol car for 47 minutes before anything else happened. No explanation, no Miranda rights, just silence and the hum of the engine keeping the air conditioning running. He watched through the window as Donovan stood outside talking on his phone. The officer kept glancing back at the patrol car, checking to make sure Jordan was still there. Where would he go? He was handcuffed in a locked vehicle. At 8:06, a second patrol car pulled up, then a third. Jordan counted 5 officers now standing in a cluster near the front of his Camry. They were talking, gesturing. Something had changed. He could see it in their body language. One of the new officers walked to the patrol car and opened the door. Different face, older, gray hair at the temples, sergeant stripes on his uniform. Staff Sergeant Hayes? The officer's tone was completely different from Donovan's. Respectful, almost careful. Yes, I'm Sergeant Pierce. I need to ask you some questions about what happened here this morning. I'd like to answer them, but I'd also like to know why I'm sitting in handcuffs for something that isn't mine. We're looking into that right now. Can you tell me where you were coming from? My apartment in Silver Spring. I'm stationed at Walter Reed. I'm an emergency medic. What time did you leave your apartment? About 6:45. My shift starts at 7:30. Pierce wrote something in a small notebook. Did you make any stops between your apartment and here? No. Straight drive. Did you allow anyone else to drive your vehicle last night? No. It was parked at my apartment complex all night. Pierce nodded slowly. And the substance officer Donovan says he found in your vehicle, you're stating you've never seen it before? I've never seen it before. I don't use drugs. I'm subject to random testing. I was tested 2 weeks ago, passed like I always do. Pierce looked back at the other officers, then back at Jordan. Staff Sergeant, I'm going to be direct with you. Something about this situation doesn't add up. We're reviewing everything right now. Does that mean you're going to uncuff me? Not yet, but we're working on it. Pierce walked back to the other officers. More talking, more phone calls. Jordan watched a black SUV pull up at 8:19. Federal plates. 2 people got out wearing suits, not police uniforms. Suits. The woman was black, mid-40s, carrying a leather briefcase. The man was white, younger, with the kind of haircut that said military or federal agent. They walked directly to the cluster of officers and flashed credentials. The entire dynamic shifted immediately. The Montgomery County officers went from relaxed to rigid. back straight, hands away from their duty belts. The posture of people who suddenly realized they were being evaluated. The woman in the suit walked to the patrol car and opened the door. Staff Sergeant Jordan Hayes? Yes, ma'am. I'm Special Agent Reeves with the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. This is Special Agent Kowalski. We're here because your commanding officer reported a potential civil rights violation. Jordan felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief exactly, but the first indication that someone was paying attention. Can you tell us what happened this morning? Jordan walked them through everything. The traffic stop with no explanation. The refusal to provide a reason. The search without consent. The bag of white powder that appeared from under his seat. The arrest. Reeves took notes on a tablet. When Jordan finished, she looked at Kowalski. He nodded slightly. Some kind of silent communication between partners who had worked together long enough to not need words. Staff Sergeant Hayes, we're going to get you out of those handcuffs, but I need you to stay here for a few more minutes while we sort something out. Is that acceptable? Yes, ma'am. Reeves walked back to the officers. Jordan couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see it. Reeves was talking. The Montgomery County officers were listening with expressions that ranged from defensive to worried. Donovan looked sick. At 8:31, Sergeant Pierce returned to the patrol car with a handcuff key. He unlocked Jordan's cuffs without a word. Jordan rubbed his wrists, red marks where the metal had been too tight. You're free to go, Pierce said. No charges are being filed. What about the substance in my car? That's being handled by federal investigators now. You'll need to speak with them about evidence and chain of custody. So I can leave? You can leave. Your vehicle is being processed as part of an investigation, so you'll need to arrange other transportation. We'll have it returned to you within 48 hours. Jordan got out of the patrol car. His legs were stiff from sitting in the same position for almost an hour. He walked to where Reeves and Kowalski were standing. Staff Sergeant, you're not under arrest. You're not being charged with anything, but we do need you to come to our office to make a formal statement. Can you do that this morning? Yes, ma'am. Do I need an attorney? That's your right, but you're not a suspect. You're a victim. We're investigating the officers, not you. Still, if you want representation present, that's completely within your rights. I'll come now. I don't need an attorney for the truth. Reeves drove. Jordan sat in the back of the federal SUV, which was significantly more comfortable than the patrol car had been. Kowalski turned around from the passenger seat. We've been watching this unit for 6 months. Your case is the 7th incident involving service members being stopped under questionable circumstances near Walter Reed. Always early morning. Always claims of traffic violations that don't hold up. Always searches that produce drugs. 7? Jordan felt his anger rising again. 7 people, and you're just now doing something about it? We've been building a case. The first 3 victims didn't want to press charges. They were scared of retaliation. The 4th and 5th recanted their statements. The 6th was transferred overseas before we could complete the investigation. You're the first one who has everything we need. Clear timeline. Security footage from your apartment showing your car parked there all night. Command structure that backed you immediately. And most importantly, you didn't consent to the search. Jordan looked out the window at the highway passing by. How many people consented because they didn't know they could say no? Most of them, Reeves said quietly. That's how it works. People see a badge and think they have to comply with everything. But you knew better. The DCIS office was in a nondescript building in downtown Washington. Jordan gave his statement in a conference room with a recording device on the table. He went through everything again, this time with more detail. Times, exact words, observations about Donovan's behavior. The statement took 90 minutes. When it was finished, Kowalski left the room and returned with a folder. He laid out several photographs on the table. Do you recognize any of these individuals? Jordan looked at the photos. 5 different people, 4 men, 1 woman, all in civilian clothes, all black or Latino. I don't know any of these people. These are the other service members who were stopped under similar circumstances. Different officers conducted the stops, but they all worked in the same unit, same patrol zone, same shift rotation. Reeves pulled out another photo. This one showed a police officer Jordan didn't recognize, Sergeant Vance Greer. He runs the unit. We believe he's been coordinating these stops as part of a quota system. Officers under his command have been planting evidence to boost their arrest numbers. Why target military personnel? Kowalski answered that one. Because you're disciplined. You follow orders. You don't typically have criminal records. You're less likely to fight back legally because you're worried about your careers and security clearances. You're perfect victims for statistics that look good on paper. Jordan felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't random. This wasn't one bad officer having a bad day. This was systematic, organized, deliberate. How long has this been happening? We don't know yet. We've traced it back 18 months, but it could be longer. We're still pulling records. What happens now? Now we finish the investigation. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. Both criminal trial for the officers involved and likely civil proceedings. Are you willing to do that? Absolutely. Reeves stood up. We'll be in touch. In the meantime, don't discuss this with anyone except your commanding officer and military legal counsel. This is an active federal investigation. Jordan left the building at 11:17. He called an Uber and went back to his apartment. His car was still impounded as evidence. His morning had been completely derailed. He was exhausted from being awake since 5 a.m. and the adrenaline crash that followed the arrest. He sat on his couch and tried to process what had just happened. 7 people, maybe more, all targeted because they wore the uniform, all stopped by officers who were supposed to serve and protect. His phone buzzed. Text from Lieutenant Richardson. Checking in. You okay? Status? Jordan typed back. Home. Gave statement to DCIS. Not charged. Car impounded. More to follow. 3 dots appeared immediately. Richardson was typing. Good. Take the rest of the day. Report tomorrow for debrief. Command is aware. You did everything right. Jordan set his phone down. He should sleep, but his mind wouldn't stop running through the morning. Every detail, every word, every moment where things could have gone differently. What he didn't know was that at that exact moment, federal agents were executing search warrants at the homes of 4 Montgomery County police officers. They were seizing computers, phones, documents. They were building a case that would eventually expose one of the most systematic evidence-planting schemes in Maryland law enforcement history. The search warrants hit at 6 in the morning, 2 days after Jordan gave his statement. Sergeant Vance Greer was eating breakfast when federal agents knocked on his door. He opened it holding a coffee mug. 20 minutes later, he was in handcuffs watching agents carry boxes out of his home office. Officer Kyle Brennan was at the gym. Agents waited in the parking lot. Officer Todd Ramsey was already at the station starting his shift when Internal Affairs walked him out in front of his entire squad. Officer Jennifer Cho was dropping her kids at school. The look on her face when agents approached her minivan would later be described by witnesses as complete shock. By noon, 4 officers were in custody. By 2 in the afternoon, the story broke on local news. Montgomery County police officers arrested in evidence-planting scheme. The headlines spread fast. Jordan was back at Walter Reed when his phone started blowing up. Texts from other service members, friends asking if he'd seen the news. A reporter somehow got his number and left 3 voicemails before he blocked it. Lieutenant Richardson called him directly. Conference room. 20 minutes. Jordan walked into a room with 5 other people. 2 he recognized from the DCIS meeting. 3 were JAG officers he'd never met. Everyone looked serious. The lead JAG officer was a colonel named Victoria Paul. She had the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. Sergeant Hayes, you're aware of the arrests this morning? Yes, ma'am. Paul slid a folder across the table. This is what we know so far. Vance Greer ran a unit of 12 officers. 4 have been arrested. 3 more are under investigation. The remaining 5 are being interviewed as potential witnesses. What did they find in the searches? Spreadsheets. Greer kept detailed records of every planted stop, target profiles, demographics, success rates. He treated it like a performance metric system. Jordan felt his jaw tighten. Performance metrics for ruining lives. Pohl continued. The spreadsheets show 37 documented stops over 18 months. Military personnel made up 22 of those stops. The pattern is clear. Greer specifically targeted service members because you're statistically less likely to have drugs in your vehicles, which made the planted evidence more believable. Clean records, security clearances, no prior arrests, perfect targets. One of the DCIS agents spoke up. We've identified 28 victims so far. 9 haven't come forward yet. We're working on locating them. What about the drugs they planted? Jordan asked. Where did they get them? Evidence room. Greer had access as a supervisor. He was checking out seized narcotics under false case numbers, then never returning them. The audit trail shows systematic theft going back at least 2 years. 2 years. Jordan tried to imagine how many people had been caught in this, how many lives destroyed, how many careers ended, how many security clearances revoked. Pohl pulled out another document. Here's what happens next. The federal prosecutor is building RICO charges, racketeering, conspiracy, civil rights violations, evidence tampering. The charges are extensive. Will they testify against each other? Brennan already has. He flipped within 6 hours of arrest. He's providing detailed testimony about how the system worked. Who knew what? Who participated? Who looked the other way? And Greer? Lawyered up immediately. Hasn't said a word, but we don't need his confession. We have the spreadsheets. We have Brennan's testimony. We have video evidence from multiple stops. We have the drugs traced back to the evidence room. The case is solid. Jordan nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Your testimony. Criminal trial first, then likely multiple civil suits. The other victims are organizing a class action lawsuit against the county. You'll probably be asked to join. I will. Pohl leaned forward slightly. I need you to understand something, Sergeant. This is going to be public. Your name will be in court documents. Reporters will want interviews. Defense attorneys will try to discredit you. They'll dig into your background, your service record, everything. It won't be easy. I understand, ma'am, but if I don't testify, they might get away with it. Other people might not come forward, so I'll do whatever it takes. Pohl smiled slightly. That's what I hoped you'd say. The meeting lasted another 40 minutes. They walked through timelines, evidence, potential testimony questions. By the time Jordan left, his head was swimming with information. He went back to his desk and tried to focus on work. Impossible. His mind kept returning to those spreadsheets. 37 documented stops. How many undocumented ones? How many people were sitting in jail right now because of planted evidence? His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Is this Sergeant Jordan Hayes? Yes. Who's this? My name is Marcus Okonkwo. I'm a Marine stationed at Quantico. I saw your name in the news reports about the Montgomery County arrests. I think the same thing happened to me. Jordan sat up straighter. Tell me what happened. Okonkwo's story was nearly identical. Pulled over for a minor traffic violation. Officer seemed aggressive from the start. Searched the vehicle. Found cocaine in the trunk. Arrested. Charged. But Okonkwo had fought it. He'd hired an attorney who demanded dash cam footage. The footage showed the officer's hand movements during the search didn't match his written report. The charges were eventually dismissed, but Okonkwo's security clearance was suspended for 8 months. His career progression stalled. He'd been fighting to get his clearance reinstated ever since. When was this? Jordan asked. 14 months ago. Do you remember the officer's name? Ramsey. Officer Todd Ramsey, one of the arrested officers. I know. I saw his photo this morning. That's why I'm calling. I want back in. I want to testify. I want my clearance reinstated. I want everyone to know I was telling the truth. Jordan took down Okonkwo's information and promised to pass it to the federal investigators. After he hung up, he sat staring at his phone. 14 months. Okonkwo had been fighting this alone for 14 months, while the scheme continued, while more people were targeted, while Greer and his unit kept planting evidence and destroying lives. Over the next week, Jordan received 9 more calls, all service members, all similar stories. Some had been convicted and served time, some were still fighting their cases, some had given up and accepted plea deals just to make it stop. Each call made Jordan angrier. Each story added another layer to the scope of what Greer had built. This wasn't four officers making bad decisions. This was an organized criminal enterprise operating inside a police department. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Jordan was subpoenaed to testify. So were 15 other victims. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the back rows. Family members of the accused officers sat on one side. Victims and their supporters sat on the other. Jordan watched Greer walk in wearing a suit instead of a uniform. He looked smaller somehow, less threatening. Just a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a tired expression. Hard to believe this person had orchestrated something so calculated and cruel. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The spreadsheets were entered as evidence, projected on screens for everyone to see. Columns for target demographics, success rates, notes about which types of vehicles were easiest to search, comments about military personnel being ideal targets because they wouldn't fight back. Jordan testified on day 3. He walked through the entire stop, every detail, every moment. The prosecutor asked him about his military service, his security clearance, his clean record, then asked him to describe what it felt like to be arrested for something he didn't do. I felt helpless. I knew I was innocent, but I also knew that didn't matter in that moment. The officer had a badge and authority. I had nothing except my word, and my word wasn't enough. The defense attorney cross-examined him aggressively, tried to suggest Jordan might have been carrying drugs without knowing it. Maybe someone else used his vehicle. Maybe he was covering for a friend. Jordan stayed calm, answered every question directly, never got defensive, never got angry, just stated facts. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict came back unanimous. Guilty on all counts for all 4 officers. Sentencing wouldn't happen for another 2 months, but the message was clear. The system had failed, but accountability was possible. Sentencing day arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. The courtroom filled early. Victims who had testified sat together in the front rows. Jordan sat between Marcus Okonkwo, whose security clearance had finally been reinstated, and a woman named Diana Chen, who had lost her nursing job after Greer's unit arrested her on fabricated charges. Judge Catherine Braddock entered. She was in her late 50s, known for thorough sentencing hearings and detailed written opinions. She didn't rush. She reviewed each defendant individually, going through their records, their roles in the scheme, the specific victims they had targeted. Officer Todd Ramsey was sentenced first. 23 years federal prison. No possibility of parole for the first 15. The courtroom was silent except for quiet crying from Ramsey's family section. Officer Kevin Lawson received 19 years. Officer Daniel Foster received 21 years. Each sentence came with detailed explanations. Judge Braddock cited specific cases, specific victims, specific lies documented in the spreadsheets. Then came Greer. Judge Braddock looked at him for a long moment before speaking. Sergeant Greer, you created and supervised a criminal organization that operated under the cover of law enforcement authority. You targeted vulnerable populations specifically because you believed they couldn't fight back. You destroyed careers, families, and lives. You betrayed every principle of justice and public service. You weaponized the badge. This court sentences you to 34 years in federal prison without possibility of parole for the first 25 years. Greer's face didn't change. He just nodded slightly, as if he had expected exactly that outcome. Jordan watched him being led away in handcuffs and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no relief, just emptiness where all the stress and fear had been. The civil lawsuits came next. Jordan's attorney filed a comprehensive federal civil rights action. Excessive force, false arrest, malicious prosecution, conspiracy to violate civil rights, failure to train and supervise, municipal liability. The complaint was 47 pages and named both the individual officers and the city. 23 other victims filed similar suits. The city's legal department looked at the criminal convictions, the documented evidence, the spreadsheets showing premeditation and planning. They knew they couldn't win at trial. Settlement negotiations began 6 weeks after sentencing. The city's opening position was insulting. Low amounts, no admission of wrongdoing, confidentiality requirements. Jordan's attorney rejected it immediately. The city came back with better offers. Still not enough. The negotiations stretched across 4 months. Finally, the city made their final offer. Individual settlements ranging from $75,000 to $350,000 depending on the severity of harm. No confidentiality requirements. Public acknowledgement that the victims had been wrongfully targeted. Agreement to implement specific departmental reforms. Jordan's settlement was $275,000. He didn't celebrate when he signed the papers. The money didn't erase what happened, didn't give him back the months of stress, didn't undo the damage to his trust in police, but it was acknowledgement, official recognition that he had been wronged. That mattered more than the amount. The departmental reforms were extensive. Federal monitoring for 5 years, complete overhaul of the internal affairs process, mandatory body cameras that couldn't be turned off, public database of all stops and searches with demographic data, civilian review board with actual authority, regular audits by external agencies. Any officer with a pattern of questionable searches would be flagged automatically. Jordan used part of his settlement to finish his degree. He graduated with honors 18 months after the arrests. His security clearance was fully reinstated. He received job offers from 3 defense contractors and 2 private aerospace companies. He took a position with a firm developing satellite systems, good pay, interesting work, normal life. But something had changed. He couldn't see police the same way. When he got pulled over for a broken taillight 6 months after starting his new job, his heart rate spiked immediately. His hands shook when he reached for his license. The officer was professional and courteous, just wrote a warning and sent Jordan on his way. But Jordan sat in his car for 10 minutes afterward, trying to calm down. He started attending a support group for people who had experienced police misconduct. Listened to their stories, shared his own. Found some comfort in knowing he wasn't alone in how the experience had affected him. One woman talked about having panic attacks whenever she saw a patrol car. A man described losing his marriage because he couldn't move past the anger. Another woman said she had moved to a different state entirely just to feel safe. Jordan stayed in the group for 8 months. Eventually, the panic lessened. He could drive without constantly checking his mirrors for police. Could go about his day without that low-level anxiety humming in the background. But he never forgot. Never let his guard down completely. Marcus Okonkwo became an advocate. He testified before the state legislature about how easily security clearances could be weaponized against service members, pushed for reforms in how military personnel were treated in the civilian justice system, got several bills passed requiring additional oversight when service members were arrested. Diana Chen, the nurse who lost her job, was rehired by her hospital with back pay and a formal apology. She became part of the Civilian Review Board, created by the settlement agreement, reviewed complaints against officers, pushed for accountability when the department tried to protect problematic cops. The 4 convicted officers filed appeals. All were denied. Greer tried twice more, both denied. They're currently serving their sentences at different federal facilities. Earliest possible release for Greer would be at age 67. The others aren't much better off. 3 other officers who had been part of the unit but weren't charged criminally were fired administratively. The department's investigation found they had known what was happening and failed to report it. Not enough evidence for criminal prosecution, but enough to end their careers. The new police chief gave a public address 6 months after the sentencing, acknowledged the department's failures, promised transparency and accountability, talked about rebuilding trust. Jordan watched it on the news and felt skeptical. Words were easy. Sustained change was hard. Jordan's case proved that documentation and federal oversight could break through systemic corruption. His decision to stand firm that morning, to trust his instincts and refuse consent, created the opening that investigators needed. Without his clarity and the institutional backing from Walter Reed, the scheme might have continued for years. The settlements didn't erase the trauma. but they forced acknowledgement. Real reform takes generations, not months, and trust once broken doesn't rebuild on promises alone. This case was disturbing, but the one on the right ends in a way no one expects.